With impeccably bad timing, a relationship Prince Charles would rather forget is being dragged up for the world to devour in a major new Netflix series. Amid a series of damaging international headlines for the royal family following Prince William and Kate's Caribbean tour and Prince Andrew's unwelcome return to the spotlight, the heir to the throne's once close friendship with the beastly paedophile Jimmy Savile has been laid bare.
It's not just a couple, it's not just 3 or 4, there's absolutely loads of files of it. December 22nd, 1989. I wonder if you would ever be prepared to meet my sister-in-law, the Duchess of York. I can't help feeling that it would be extremely helpful to her if you could. I feel she could do with some of your straightforward common sense. Sir Charles says to Jimmy, I attach a copy of my memo on disasters, which incorporates your points, and I showed to my father, and he showed it to Her Majesty. Jimmy had sent back to Charles a 5-part manual titled Guidelines for Members of the Royal Family and Their Staff. Jimmy seems to be a kind of unofficial chief advisor to the Prince of Wales.
Far from ideal, but it's safe to say Netflix's already strained relationship with the royals is now at an all-time low. I've written a column on this for the Mail Online tonight, and I say in there the damaging Savile documentary promoted to British newspapers solely around the disgraced BBC presenter's friendship with Charles comes hot on the heels of the grotesque Diana the Musical, amid a feeling that Netflix is increasingly looking to broadcast ever more provocative content about the British royal family. This fresh headache does come at a worrying time for the Prince of Wales, as a new Ipsos poll reveals middling popularity, with almost half of Brits thinking he should step aside for his son Prince William in the line of succession. So, with media giants like Netflix intent on royal mudslinging, we're asking, are the recent attacks on Prince Charles unfair? Send me your thoughts to Dan at GBNews.uk, tweet me at GBNews. But weighing in on this now, our favourite royal commentator, Robert Jobson, and the former Lib Dem Minister, Norman Baker, author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. Jobbo, you think this is unfair on Prince Charles. Why?
I think that we've all got 20/20 vision with hindsight, and you've got to remember, and I'm sure Norman was an MP, and they could have, a lot of these things could have been raised in Parliament underprivileged. I know as a journalist, during the height of Jimmy Savile's appalling behaviour, newspapers were being sued left, right, and centre, and judges were awarding thousands of pounds to Jimmy Savile for the mistreatment of his character. Look, it's a misjudgment by the Prince of Wales. Clearly, it is. But at that particular time, are we going to then call into question the judgment of Mrs. Thatcher and all sorts of leading figures? At a time when Fleet Street was behind the scenes trying to expose this guy for what he was, and he would regularly get calls from journalist friends of mine who he's not, and they'd say, "Oh, Jimmy, I suppose you're not speaking to us anymore." He said, "No, I love to speak to my friends from the tabloids because they write these things about me and I get thousands of pounds." So I think it's easy in hindsight to criticise the Prince of Wales. I'm sure he's cringing at everything that's been written and shown about him in this documentary. A lot of it actually came out about 10 years ago. So I think it's just the fact that it's new to a new generation. But a lot was written 10 years ago about his behaviour. There was talk that he was quite an advisor in terms of, can you believe it now, marriage guidance in terms of Charles and Diana, which was something else that he was supposed to have done. But this character was very, very out there in the sort of, in the 80s and 90s and children's TV. I remember we all wanted to get a Jim will fix it badge. So I don't know. It's easy in hindsight to look back when we know exactly what a vile character he was. But he was right in the heart of the establishment. He had a lot of powerful people in his pocket. And I don't remember too many MPs speaking out against him.
Norman Baker, you say this coverage isn't unfair to Prince Charles. He deserves it.
Well, I don't know about deserves it, but Prince Charles is a public figure like anybody else in the public limelight, who's an MP or a councillor or whatever else. And I think it's legitimate for the public to know about the actions that the heir to the throne has taken. He'll be king before very long, I imagine. And therefore, his judgment is a matter of public interest. Obviously, Prince Charles didn't know what Jimmy Savile was up to. No one's suggesting that in the least. But the fact is, he did make a serious misjudgment in becoming friends with this man. He became very close friends. Jimmy Savile had almost unparalleled access to Clarence House, for example. He did, as Robert says, advise him and Charles and Diana on their marriage. So in that case, Jim didn't fix it. very well at all. And we've also had a situation where, you've seen the letters which Netflix have produced. Well, they are genuine letters. He did write those letters. And when Savile died, it was Charles and Camilla who led the tributes, in fact, at that point. So even at that stage, he was still supporting Jimmy Savile. Now, it's true that Jimmy Savile was very keen to be friendly with Prince Charles and others in the establishment to make sure that he got some protection from himself. But, the things about Jimmy Savile were known a long time ago by many people. For instance, I know from my days as Transport Minister that he was dropped by British Rail. He used to be the advert of British Rail, this is the age of the train and all that. He was dropped by British Rail because they were told about his, shall we say, unseemly behaviour in the mortuary at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, along with various dead bodies there. So they dropped him.
And it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace that he got through his life with this conspiracy of silence through so many in authority. I agree with that. But Job, look, sorry, you come
clearly, he got past all sorts of things, didn't he? The Secret Services would have been looking into them. We know, God, they used to look into Labour MPs all the time, like Harold Wilson and God knows what else. This guy got a knighthood. He got vetted to go into Clarence House. There's obviously a huge amount of errors have been made along the way, and people have been hoodwinked by him. I mean, he was a very, very convincing court jester.
No, I understand that. But Jobbo, what I just want to ask you about, though, is that it feels like, especially from the Netflix point of view, that there is some sort of growing campaign against Prince Charles. Obviously, Prince Charles has been very concerned about the way that he's portrayed in The Crown. There have been very bad portrayals of the royal family, including the Queen in Diana the musical. And is it just me thinking, isn't this odd that all of these shows are coming after Prince Charles's own son, Prince Harry, and his wife Meghan have signed up as employees of Netflix? You can understand, Jobbo, can't you, why people close to Prince Charles are very angry with Netflix, because it feels like there's some sort of campaign against him.
Well, when there's lots of money being passed in hands between Harry and Meghan, I'm sure there must have been a few deals along the way. You never know. But the fact is, they're supposed to be separate. My feeling is that it's for them. It gives them good traction. It keeps them out there. It keeps the controversies going. I think that really, yes, they did lead. In terms of again with Jimmy Savile, they did lead the tributes, Charles and Camilla, but as did a lot of politicians. And then within about 3 weeks, BBC had to completely retract that documentary they put out. But my feeling is that, he's actually, Charles would do better just to rise above it all, actually, because, at the end of the day, Netflix is dealing, not in this case, but in the case of The Crown, with fiction, although it's supposedly loosely based on fact. And, and that Ipsos poll that came out, it's quite easy to say that only 48%, wanted to be the next king. Well, actually, that's up 11% over the last 4 years in his favour. So these things, the statistics can be sort of done either way. But this isn't going to help. People of my son's generation, 20, don't even know who Jimmy Savile was, except for they look at him and think, how could anybody not have seen what he was? And that's the reaction of some of the younger
Complete and utter scumbag. No, indeed. Norman Baker, you say you think Prince Charles is in trouble for a whole load of things. What are you referring to?
Well, I mean, look, there's an issue about Prince Charles's judgment. Prince Charles has got many positive points, let me just say that, to be fair. But there is an issue about his judgment, and he gets associated with a number of people over the years who really ought not to. Jimmy Savile's the most obvious example, but there's a previous Bishop of Lewis who was in my constituency, obviously, down here in Lewis, and the Bishop of Lewis was admitted gross misconduct in 1993 with a 17-year-old boy he was whipping, and Prince Charles defended him after that and kept in contact with him, and only broke off really when it was much later in the day. And by the way, that 17-year-old committed suicide. There's also
I think he broke off at the end when he over the conviction, didn't he, Norman? I think at that time.
That's right.
Clearly, he's judged.
That's right.
It was when
it was a long time, but the Bishop of Lewis admitted guilt in 1993, took a caution at that point. There's also the business people Prince Charles had dealt with. One of them was the Turkish businessman Kem Uzan, who was subsequently sentenced to jail for fraud-related offences, with Kenneth Lay, the chief executive of Enron. These people want to be associated with Prince Charles, so to give them cover as respectable people. That's what they do. That's what Jimmy Savile was doing. And Charles really hasn't exercised the judgment in terms of who he is around him. And that's a serious issue that he has to face, I think, going forward. And of course,
Norman Baker, what's your reading of this poll? What's your reading of this poll? Because Jobbo says, oh, actually, it shows Prince Charles's popularity is increasing. I would say that's maybe quite a kind reading of the poll from Jobbo, because my reading of it is that, well, over half of Brits... Well, it is growing.
It's got 11% in 4 years. It's a low start. I'm not saying that, but it has gone up 11% in 4 years. So that's just me telling you what.
But Norman, no, and I understand that. I understand that is the fact. But Norman, I would argue the Queen is in her twilight years. Is it not worrying that less than half the British public want Charles as king?
It is, and to be honest with you, the Queen's got tremendous respect from everybody, and she's a difficult act to follow. But Charles has been hanging around for decades now, and people know all about him. They know his good points and his bad points. And I think they probably think, someone it's not Charles's fault, but someone over 70 coming to the throne isn't exactly a brand new brush, is he? And they think they prefer William. Well, the reality is that the hereditary principle is such that you get who's next in line, whoever they are. You can get someone diligent like the Queen, or you can get someone who's basically a Nazi like Edward VIII. You don't get a choice in these matters. It's who's next in line. So I feel a bit sorry for Charles in that respect. He's waited a very long time to be king, and now people are saying, let's skip a generation.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a sweeping thing to say that Edward VIII was basically a Nazi, but I hear what you're saying.
No, it isn't, Robert, actually. Believe me, it isn't.
I've researched it as well, Norman, and I don't think he was. I think that he had bad associations, but I don't think he was a Nazi. I think that's quite a sweeping statement.
Well, he was certainly quite close
German authority
to Mr. Hitler, was he not?
Not as close as you're saying. Not as close. It's an easy sweep and it's an easy swipe, and I think that it's not as it's not as simple as that.
But his association with Hitler was a disgrace, and his association with Hitler was a complete disgrace. And thank goodness, we don't have any issues like that with Prince.
Quite right.
Robert Jobson, our royal commentator, thank you so much. And the royal author, Norman Baker.
I can tell you that.
Thank you so much. So who do you agree with on this? It is a thorny one. In this case, I do think Prince Charles is being treated unfairly. I have to be honest with you. But Lola on Twitter says, of course it's unfair. I'm pretty sure we've all been tricked by someone in some capacity or other during our lifetimes. I know I have. From Dot, most people thought Savile was a good guy. To single out Charles to discredit him is unacceptable. And that is exactly what is happening here. And Janet on email says, someone has an agenda here. Prince Charles would make a good king. He's a decent man who keeps being vilified. Why? And who wants this? Well, I think that's a very good point. Your verdict is now, and 64% of you agree that the recent attacks on Prince Charles are unfair, while 36% of you say the attacks are not unfair. What I would say is, when is Prince Harry, Prince Charles's son, going to take a moral stand and say, I will not work for a company in Netflix that continually slags off my relatives? Because it's not just Prince Charles. That disgraceful Diana the Musical claimed that his mother used HIV patients for publicity, and yet still Prince Harry takes the millions from Netflix, which I think says a lot about him.